All right, hello and welcome. This is your brother Elihu, the advocate. Some folks might call it or pronounce it Elihu, and that's fine as well. Um, but I am here to present my first video on YouTube on my channel. Uh, you know, I have to come on here and create this video because there is a perspective that seems to be getting missed when it comes to this Israelite question, this awakening, and so on and so forth. So, we got a lot of scholarly people, a lot of folks who have done a lot of reading. People are talking back and forth, but it seems like a lot of the conversation is going past people or over people's heads, and nobody's really hearing the other side. And a lot of questions are going unanswered. And so my position is from the pews. And so I want to give you guys a neutral perspective, not, someone who has already decided that they are an Israelite, not someone who definitely doesn't identify with any Western form of Christianity, just somebody who's undecided and looking for truth. And I'm sitting in the pews, and I'm sitting in the chat rooms, and I'm listening. And there are a lot of questions that are going unanswered, and a lot of disturbing things that are happening on both sides that needs to be rectified. Because I don't know whether or not you realize this, but both the Israelite side, at least those who believe in the Messiah, who believe in Jesus Christ, and the Orthodox side need each other. There needs to be a reconciliation. There needs to be a kind of a understanding from both sides. And that doesn't seem like that's the direction that we're headed in. And I think I know why. Just so that you know, I mean, from my perspective, even though I don't consider myself to be a scholar, I have read the entire book twice, at least, and I do read it on a regular basis. There are things that I struggle with in the Bible, like anybody else, but I have what I think is a pretty good grip on the gist of the entire book. I see consistency from Genesis all the way through Revelations. And so I do have a learned perspective, even though it's a learned perspective from the pews. And I don't mind sitting in the pews and being that person and giving you that perspective. But here in Ezekiel 14:11, it says, "Thus they will be my people and I will be their God." I hope all Christians, all people who believe in Jesus Christ, understand that this is the absolute crux of the entire scripture. It's not whether or not you go to hell. It's not whether or not you follow the law. It's not how well you understand the writings of Paul, or how well you can exegete the text and all that stuff. It's about relationship. The relationship between mankind, God's prized creation, and God himself was lost. And God has been working to restore it. This is what the entire scripture is about. This is what everything hinges on. And so, from that perspective, that's my overall general view of the gospel and the scriptures. So, what about this Israelite question? Again, I'm sitting in the pews, so I'm not seminary trained. I never wanted to be seminary. Well, actually, I can't say that. I thought about being seminary trained, and I talked myself out of it because I saw some disturbing things coming out of seminary. And I'm not ordained either, right? So I've never been behind a pulpit, never preached a sermon formally, except for in my shower or in my car, and to myself, right? But I do believe I can represent how the message is being received by a good majority of folks that are in the chat rooms and so on and so forth. I do believe that there is a good proportion of people who just want to know the truth. And so they remain either undecided or, at least still open to aspects of both sides. And that's the perspective that I have. Um, I don't have any respect for, not that I don't have respect for the people, but I'm not saying that I am loyal to either side. Um, and I don't respect the concept of there being sides in this matter. That's probably a better way to put that. I vigorously question both orthodoxy and the Israelite position. And even though this probably puts me in an awkward position, I might not ever get anybody to look at my videos because of this, because that's not a good way to make friends, to have to question both sides. I do hold that both sides should appreciate me, because I'm going to challenge you and I'm going to make sure that what you're saying is translatable to the masses, not just to the folks, the yes people in your YouTube echo chambers. It's important that your message from both sides goes beyond that. And so I just, and I wonder how many other people are frustrated by what they've been seeing on the YouTube channels, by the discussions that have been had. Tired of seeing really smart and educated Black people talking in circles and acting as if they can't hear one another, acting as if they don't understand the spirit of what somebody else is saying, seeming as if they're trying to dodge questions. How many people are frustrated with listening to these videos or watching these videos for hours and hearing a good question come up, but then somehow it just gets skirted around, and there's kind of a lack of moderation to say, hold on, you need to answer that question. um, there seems to be a refusal to concede to good points from the other side, right? It's as if each side feels as if they know everything and their position is absolute. They haven't come to the discussion to learn. They've come to the discussion to win an argument, and that leads to debate tactics. And we all should understand that when you debate rather than have a discussion, the tactics that you use to try to debate, such as character defamation, or leading questions, loaded questions, straw man arguments, all those types of things can lead to you winning the argument at the expense of the truth. And that's been going on a lot in these videos. It doesn't seem like each position is being accurately assessed, right? It doesn't seem as if people are listening to what the other person is saying, and saying, it sounds like this is the spirit from which you are coming. Like, this is what you're trying to relay. Is this true? Is this what you're actually trying to say? Instead, people are hearing what people are saying, listening for cue words to help them come to a point where they say, okay, no, I can't agree with you, because you just said the law, and the law is not required for salvation. So nope, we're on opposite sides. This is a different gospel. You haven't even really heard what the person said. You're just waiting for something that you can pounce on and demolish the other person's position and debunk a person. And that's garbage. That does nothing for the pews. That does nothing for the people that are coming here to try to learn. And it never seems like either side learns anything from the opposition, because they don't admit it. you can tell when you're dealing with an opponent who's just as adamant about discovering the truth as you are, versus dealing with an opponent who's actively trying to spread lies or trying to just simply uphold an established position, regardless of whether or not it's the truth. You know, and if you can't come to that conclusion about who your opponent is, then you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. But I don't see that happening. And so it leads to a lot of fruitless discussions and a lot of hours that are spent on YouTube without edification. So here are some of my issues, and I'm going to share issues on both sides and issues in the pews. So just hold tight, and we're going to go through these fairly briefly. All right. So from the Orthodox position, here's what I'm seeing. Okay. I see a passion for Jesus and a passion for today's version of the biblical canon. That's Genesis through Revelations. You know, and I love that because I hold that same position, right? I feel passionate about Jesus Christ. I love the work that he did on the cross, and I'm thankful for him saving me from my sins and giving me an opportunity to engage in relationship with the Heavenly Father once again, so that I won't perish when eternity comes, right? So I appreciate that passion. I also appreciate from the Orthodox position the fact that it seems like there is a primary goal to see people saved, to provide salvation, to lead people to salvation. You know, it's a recurring theme, and I applaud that. I think there is value in that. But at the same time, I feel as if from the Orthodox position, people are convinced that their conclusions are right, that what they've been taught is right, that what they believe they've read in the Bible is 100% right. And there seems to be a sort of closed mindedness to alternative biblical interpretations. And that becomes problematic because while you're saying, you know, if you say Paul or the New Testament books are not scripture, then you're preaching another gospel, and that is that. That's the end of it, because the biblical canon is established. And so, you know, I stand firm on the biblical canon, and I know what he means when he said such and such in Galatians and Romans and so on and so forth. But then you turn around and you admit that you don't understand eschatology very well. As a matter of fact, I have never seen or met a preacher who talks about eschatology. It's just a subject that people gloss over. And eschatology is almost the bulk of the Old Testament. It's at least a good chunk of it. So what it appears to be is a doing away with a whole half of the Bible. And that becomes problematic because I don't see how you can stand so firmly on your ability to interpret the Bible, particularly the New Testament, when you struggle with eschatology, right? Like, and not only do you struggle with it, but you seem to like fight against people who actually take a stab at it, who want to understand eschatology. You don't answer the questions. You shun people when they bring up things like, is it possible that when God was talking to his prophets about what's going to happen to Israel, that Black people in America are fulfilling those prophetic utterances? Like, it's just, you get crickets. People don't want to talk to you anymore, but yet they are the authority on biblical interpretation. That does not add up. Also, the Orthodox people from the Orthodox position seem to be painfully indifferent to the cause of Black people learning what their history is, whether it's, you know, just saying that it doesn't matter, or being patronizing and condescending and saying, you know, more power to you, or God bless you if you want to learn your history. Go ahead and do that. And then they go off into this whole other thing that tells you how unimportant it is. That is, that's like stabbing somebody in the gut, right? Uh, Anybody that knows anything about fatherlessness, as a matter of fact, I am a fatherless person myself, and in being fatherless and not having a father, I feel as if I have a kind of a high level understanding of the emotional uh, aspect of this awakening, because fathers carry legacy and heritage. When you don't have a father, you don't have a legacy or a heritage. Point blank, at least not in the flesh, right? That is something that is instilled in you from your father. And as a fatherless person myself, I see my life in multiple aspects. It's been reaffirmed to me over and over again. I see how my life is like a small example of what's happening with all Black America, because us being cut off from our heritage is like us being bastardized, because we don't have anybody that claims us and says, here, this is what I've developed for you. This is your culture. This is your heritage. And that is painful. So, but when a person who is fatherless finally kind of girds his loins and develops the um, desire to go and search for their father, I can tell you firsthand, you kind of expect for people to cheer you on, and you would expect for people who love you to actually help you in that endeavor. Unfortunately, that's not always the truth. And when you come to the realization of that, of the truth, that even if somebody loves you, they still might turn to you and say, look, it doesn't matter who your father is. Man, when you hear those words, I'm telling you, it's one of the most painful experiences that you can experience. When somebody comes to you and tells somebody that you love, tells you, look, God is your father. You don't need to worry about who your daddy is. It's the worst thing you could do. It's the most unloving thing you could possibly do. And yet people from the Orthodox position seem to be painfully indifferent to this cause. And that is the reaction that you're getting back from the Israelite community. It's one as if you have literally tried to stab them in their heart. And so, yes, they get emotional and they make responses and they call you certain names and so on and so forth, because hurt people, right? This is what's happening. And then the last thing I'd like to say about the Orthodox position is that they're overly concerned about heresy. And I know this is just completely diametric to the culture of Orthodox or even Western Christianity, but we have to understand that when you set a lie up next to the truth, the lie loses every time. We do not have to protect the truth. We can pass through lies. We can discuss lies, and it will come we'll all come to an understanding that it is a lie, as long as the truth is also present, right? But what we do with this heresy doctrine or this heresy culture is the same thing that they did with the Salem witch trials, the same thing that they did with the Inquisition. What they're doing is they're trying to control information. When you hear an idea that somebody presents, and and it sounds as if it goes against what you feel you already know to be true, and instead of exploring what they have said to see if it's actually true, to see if it can hold up uh, to reality, but instead of doing that, you just label it as heresy. And you do that with the backing of the majority opinion. What you have done is you have potentially demonized the truth. Because if what they said is true, and yet you convince the majority or those in power that it's heresy, or you back up the majority or those who are in power that what the truth is heresy, then obviously you're not standing for the truth, right? And that is what heresy culture does. We need to back off on this idea of determining what is heresy. And it's not necessary. First of all, it's above our pay grade, and it has always been above our pay grade. This idea of establishing doctrine and so on and so forth is something that was done in order to control the masses. God does not need that. He needs you to preach the truth. If what you are saying is diametrically opposed to what somebody else is saying, then you just simply need to say your truth. You don't need to demonize what somebody else is trying to say. All you need to do is speak your truth, and you can explore the inconsistencies in what the other person is saying without just trying to manipulate the masses into thinking that it's a demonic or it's heresy. Now, from the Israelite position, here's the thing that really gets me. I don't understand why it's not being seen this way, but the Messianic Israelites today are equally as passionate about Jesus and today's version of the biblical canon. At least a lot of them are, and those are the ones. Those are really the only ones that I can uh, well, they're the ones that I respect the most. I have heard some arguments about the writings of Paul that may, be something that I can, um, consider or think about in a different way. But for the most part, the Bible has been good to me. And I think, and it seems consistent all the way throughout. And so, uh, and that seems to be the position of many of the Messianic Israelites as well. It also seems, though, that the Israelites are more willing to attempt an understanding at biblical prophecy and the connections between the Old Testament and the New Testament scriptures. And this is something that is drastically deficient in the church. And it is so frustrating because when I read the Bible, it's like I'm reading the scripture and 10 other scriptures just pop up in my head. Oh, that's why he said that back then, in the Old Testament, and so on and so forth. But that's not the way people are teaching. And it seems like it's because people don't really have a good understanding of what's being said in the Old Testament. And so that teaching is severely neglected. But now we have this group of people who believe that Black people might be or are the Israelites. And here they are, they're actually teaching the whole Bible. And so you cannot blame people for wanting to hear what they have to say. On the other hand, unfortunately, there are some issues with the Israelite position as well. And they start with the fact that they're making giant leaps uh, from circumstantial evidence. I mean, the fact that Black Jews or people that were known to be Jews were sold into slavery does not mean that every slave was a Jew, right? You cannot make that giant leaping conclusion, right? And then, if you don't recognize that you have made a huge jump based on circumstantial evidence. See, it's good evidence. It's good research that was done. It's invaluable that these things were uncovered. That the Sephardic Jews were seen as dark skinned, although one of the sources did mention that swarthy actually meant just like a suntan. And I can bring that up later on. One source said that that's what they meant by swarthy. The Sephardic Jews are swarthy. But then there are other resources that say the Sephardic Jews or the Portuguese Jews were the Black Jews, right? And so these are great things, right? This concept of ancient Jews being dark skinned. So they were lying in Hollywood with Charleston Heston and with all of our colorful children's Bibles with Adam and Eve being blonde haired and blue eyed, and Noah having gray hair and looking like a Caucasian, and all these types of things. Yeah, they were lying. That needs to be exposed. And so you can say definitively that those things are lies, but you cannot say definitively that that means that I or you or just any person who feels as if they descend from the transatlantic slave trade or slaves are Israel. That's a conclusion that has not been proven yet. You have to prove that literally every slave that was brought over uh, was an Israelite. You can't just say, "Oh, see, a lot of the names from the slave book end in Yah." That means all the slaves were um, Israelites. That's not a viable conclusion. And so what that does is it damages credibility. It doesn't erase your credibility. And for me, it certainly does not, um, uh, you know, uh, cause me to think less of your intellect or less of or to devalue the information that you're bringing. But it is disappointing to hear you hold to these leaping conclusions that are not substantiated. When you're doing scholarly work, it is a red flag whenever everything that you find, everything that you present, um, only bolsters your narrative. Scholars present both the positive findings and the negative findings. In a scholarly work, or a scholarly presentation, you ought to be able to say, this piece of evidence proves this, and that. However, it does not prove such and such and such. We need more evidence. We need to go search somewhere else or get some sort of idea of how we can prove such and such and such, which was left unproven by this certain piece of evidence, right? I'm not seeing that from the presentations given by the Israelites. And that is disappointing because I know they are on a scholarly level, right? But they are not going to be received outside of the YouTube echo chambers. They're not going to have a seat at the table to have these discussions and be taken seriously if they don't learn how to present the limitations of their research along with the miraculous and the huge eureka type findings. Okay, so that's something that needs to be switched over, and then we need to stop making overestimations of the implications of the findings. For instance, the fact that there were Black Jews in Africa does not mean that all of the Jews or the bloodline Israelites today are Black. It doesn't mean that. Even if European Jews were mostly converted, it does not mean that there is no bloodline amongst them as well. You cannot make that assumption, even if in a certain area, in one source, they mentioned that the Jews were more likely to be traded. That statement, more likely, itself implies that there was still a proportion of Negroes who were traded and sold into slavery who were not Jews. It implies that. So you cannot say that 100% of the slaves were Jews, and you cannot step out and say that, we can tell who is a Gentile by the color of their skin. You can't do it. You just can't do that. Now, if there's more evidence out there that can prove that beyond the shadow of a doubt, that's fine with me. But you got to present it, and it has to actually make sense. All right. Now, what about the behavior in the pews? Both Orthodox and Israelite proponents are flooding the comment sections, especially on semi-neutral platforms, right? Now, I say that because you have to be on a semi-neutral platform, because if you're on a Israelite-only platform, then you will be demonized as a troll and you will be blocked, which is the ultimate form of bias, right? And it discredits, the information that's being shared in the chat rooms when you block people simply because they say something that you don't want to hear. Although still, I believe most participants in the chat rooms, and even people who just are watching and not engaging in the chat rooms, most people just want the truth. They want to know what the truth is. And that's what they're searching for. And I think people who are diehard about evidence and can have had an opportunity to work through the emotional part of the awakening would come to the conclusion that they have to be undecided at this point, right? Because only emotions kind of keep you in this attitude that it has been proven that I am an Israelite. Where are you on the family tree? Or where is the person whose DNA you match on the family tree? You cannot say definitively that you are an Israelite based on the evidence that has been presented, even though it's been a lot. I think Dante Fortson mentions 500 plus sources that are now on his website. This is beautiful work, but there are limitations to its interpretation. Now, back to the pews, or back to the chat sessions, the chat, areas, and even on things like HebrewSphere.com and other platforms for Hebrews. Hardcore Israelites are kind of mean, they seem to kind of always be ready to pounce. Like the moment you say anything against the idea of Black people being Israelites, it's like they're ready to get you. How'd you get on here? Get him out of here. Well, that is not the way to come to the truth. But you see, there are two primary goals, I think, that are floating around amongst us. One goal is to identify the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But the other goal is to obtain some sort of healing, right? Because the people are hurt. They're hurt by the lack of a heritage. They're hurt by the mistreatment and the abuse in America, and they want to stop hurting. And sometimes a painkiller can come along, even though it's not the truth. Truth is the ultimate cure, right? But truth is like surgery. But you can get a word that is like a painkiller. You know, uh, there were black Jews in West Africa and they were sold into the slave trade. That means we are Israelites. You are an Israelite. You are an Israelite. Everybody's an Israelite who's black. That means we have found our heritage. Oh, it's a great pain reliever. But is it the truth? And see, a lot of people prefer the pain reliever over the truth. That's something that we got to get out of. Jesus said the truth will set you free. If you feel like you're in bondage or as if you're being oppressed, the truth will set you free. That's what we need. We need to stop name calling. We need to stop calling folks pagan Mike and idolaters and all this kind of stuff. I know we black folks, so I get it. We do the dozens all day long, and some folks can take it. I think I can commend Pastor Mike or Elder Mike for how he handles these things, for sure. And so, but I think it's wrong how we label one another so quickly. And I think the most detrimental thing is how we label one another in the chats, and that label leads to blocking people and silencing people when we're all trying to come together to discover the truth. That needs to stop. But it doesn't mean that I don't understand, because like I said, hurt people hurt people. The key is to recognize that you're doing something out of hurt, or that you're believing something out of hurt, and that there are still more steps to be made in order to come to the truth. Now, what about the Orthodox position, the folks in the pews? Man, it's getting annoying how closed-minded people seem to be from the Orthodox position. And to be honest, it seems like when you hear the alternative interpretations of the Bible that come out of the Israelite camps, or not camps, but out of the Israelite community, it seems like you just kind of shut off. It's almost as if you're walking past them with your nose in the air, looking down on them as they're saying what they're saying, and saying, you just don't understand the scriptures. You're unlearned. You're a Googleologist, and you're pseudo, and I have the understanding because this is what has been established from orthodoxy. No, 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 no. If somebody makes a mistake and builds a whole church based off of that mistake, then everything that you've learned has a potential to be wrong, even if you've self-corrected to a certain degree through your own study, through your own relationship with Christ. There are still areas that could be wrong, right? So you have to come to a recognition of the limitations of your positions, of the things that you have been taught. You know, our entire eternity, our eternal existence will be uh, uh, one revelation after another, from glory to glory. That's why Paul said, it's not as if have attained, right? But he presses toward the mark, toward the call of the upward call, right? So there's always something new to be learned, and you have to be willing to accept that maybe something that you had accepted as foundational and unchanging could have been wrong, right? It could have been wrong. And so all of that just boils down to just kind of just this haughty attitude. Kind of, it's annoying to say the least. And I think it really needs to be recalibrated. So, like I said, my perspective is neutral, and it's from a person that is sitting in the pews trying to learn the truth, right? And from my perspective, this is what we need in the pews. First of all, we need shorter videos. Like, and I'm so tired of asking a question and then being directed to, you know, 24 to 36 hours of videos in order to get the answer to a basic question. How do you define who is Israel? I did a video on that. You need to go back and do your studies, because you sound like you don't know. You're just starting in this thing, and you need to do your own research. Come on, man, just answer the question. There are things that, as a scholar, as a proponent of a certain position, you should have an answer, a concise answer ready, right? And then if you're doing a teaching, make your video shorter, like get to the point, teach what you're trying to teach and leave the drama out of it. I'm tired of hearing the defamation of other people. Cherry Love defaming Teo Ministries and Dante Fortson hitting back and doing clapback videos and Christmas gifts and all of, and then petitions and all this. That is not necessary. We don't need that in the pews, like, to be honest. Now, there are some people that are just entertained by that, and maybe that keeps your numbers up. But from my perspective, I'm trying to get to the truth. So I'm wondering if somebody's going to step up and actually be a leader and start to teach things in a way that is palatable, in a way that I can consume it on during my commute to work, and I don't have to sit there and listen to all the hatred that you have for another side. I don't want to hear that anymore, to be honest. Now, of course, you can easily say, if you don't want to hear it, then don't listen, unsubscribe, don't watch my videos. And that's a sad thing if you say that, because I believe in you. Even though I'm admonishing you, it doesn't mean that I don't believe in you. I've already said I think you are of scholarly caliber, right? If the shoe fits, wear it. That's all I'm saying. But if you're just going to dismiss me because you just want to do what you want to do and you don't care about what my perspective is, then I mean, that's on you. And you do what you got to do, because I'm going to find the truth with or without you. That's for sure. We need more discussions and less debates. You got to understand, in a debate, the goal is not to find the truth. In a debate, the goal is to defeat your opponent and to win an argument. You can do all kinds of shady stuff in order to win an argument. But if your side is false, then you've just established a lie. What we need are discussions, nothing but discussions. I don't think we need any more debates where people are coming to the table convinced that they know th- that what they're saying is true. No, 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 no. You don't need to be convinced that what you're saying is true. What you need to do is have evidence to support what you are saying and have a rational reason for why you believe it is true. And then you need to be open minded to the other side and hear their perspective, because there is always another perspective. And only the truth can withstand the onslaught of various perspectives. A lie cannot. So we need more discussions. And we need our discussions to stay on topic, man. If somebody asks, if the topic of the video is, are all black people Israelites? We do not need to talk about salvation. That's not the topic. We don't need to keep trying to, segue into subjects that we feel more strongly about, right? If you, if the historical evidence or whatever is more than what you can respond to for the subject matter at hand, then you need to concede. It's okay. Like, it's okay to concede. But this tactic of trying to just go to a whole different subject so that you can talk about something that makes you sound more relevant is annoying. When a question is asked, answer the question directly. And moderators need to ensure that the question is being answered directly, not just letting people just run on and go off. Answer the question. That's important. So, speaking of questions, as I begin to wrap this thing up, these are the questions that I have perceived from my perspective in the pews. Anybody who are saying either that black people are Israelites or black people are not Israelites needs to tell us how they define what a bloodline descendant of Israel is. And they need to show us and explain how the Bible corroborates their definition is as in agreement with God, right? From my perspective, it seems like there's two different ways you can go with this thing. One way is patrilineage only, and nobody's talking about this. I don't understand why. I don't know why people aren't establishing their position. Do they believe it's through the Father only, or anybody? If you are just simply on the tree, period. If you have a drop of Israelite blood in you, you are bloodline. I don't know. And then you also have to deal with the mixed multitudes. These are things that need to be answered, right? Are all American descendants of slaves bloodline Israelites? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're concluding from the evidence? And why? Answer the question. Is white skin enough to rule somebody else out as being bloodline? I know you're a Gentile because you're white. Is that a substantial statement? Is that a substantiated statement based on the evidence? Or is it a leaping conclusion? Because you found out that a lot of the European Israelites or European Jews are saying that that they're converts, right? So first of all, for everyone that says that they're converts, there are probably millions that say that they're not. Right? That's the first thing. Uh, and nobody's checking into their motives. Nobody's looking into, their history, or they just hear that somebody says something that agrees with their narrative, and they're like, "Oh, see now, this is somebody who's." We don't have the evidence to say that just because a person is white, they are not bloodline Israel. I haven't seen the evidence. If the evidence is out there, that needs to be made perfectly clear. On the Orthodox side, why in the world were the feast days done away with in the American Western Church? Please help me understand how in the world it makes sense for us to completely do away with the only holidays that God Himself uttered as something that He wanted a people to do. And yet we are emotionally attached to a bunch of holidays that God never ever talked about. And yet we are Bible believing, Genesis to Revelations. We're Bible believing Christians. But we don't even teach our children about Passover. We don't even teach our children about tabernacles and first fruits and so on and so forth. We don't teach our children how Jesus fulfilled the law. We don't teach our I'm talking about our children. Like this is stuff that we need to be like we actually need to be developing curriculum for our children, because they're the ones that are going unnoticed right now while we're arguing. They're the ones that are missing out. But in order to teach it to our children, we have to have a clear understanding of things. And that is something that is completely just beyond me. How did we get to the point where we're worshiping the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of the people of Israel? We acknowledge that Israel is the apple of His eye. We acknowledge that He is the one who instituted the feast days. And yet we completely neglect them while we have this emotional attachment to Christmas and Easter. That's a problem. That's a problem to me. Now, I could understand if we added on, St. Patrick's Day and Valentine's Day, and even, I guess, celebration of Christ's birth or whatever, or celebration of His raising from the dead. I can understand if we added that on. But the church always had a tradition of celebrating the holy days. I could understand that. But this concept of completely erasing the holy days is beyond me. And that's something that people need to answer for. Why did I grow up in a church but never heard about the connection between the feast days and the biblical prophecies? Again, this deficiency in understanding the Old Testament and the prophecies. And this is not just my testimony. I've heard people say, "Oh, you didn't go to the right church." Man, come on. The majority of churches don't teach this stuff, right? That's a problem. If you want to be an urban apologetic, you need to address that issue and stop trying to tell people that they're not Israelites, right? Because they might be. You're wasting your time. Help me understand what the heck has been going on in this American church. Why does the American church struggle with eschatology? I've already said that. Why do we venerate church fathers? What is this all about? Oh, the church fathers said that. Who cares? I don't care what a church father said. I care about what God said. I care about what He's doing. I care about His narrative. I care about the people that he is using. But as far as I can tell, these church fathers are the same ones who say, I don't need no feast days. The church fathers are the ones that allowed this, these pagan holidays to overtake our culture. And see, here's the thing about the pagan holidays, and I'm going to leave it alone because that's not what this video is about. But if you notice overall, the holy days in the Bible are about God, about God's people celebrating God, celebrating their relationship with God. Now in America, those holidays are actually kind of boring and uncomfortable. Why? Because we're used to holidays that celebrate us. And that's the reason why we have a emotional connection to these stupid American holidays. Because we're used to celebrating ourselves. On Valentine's, we're used to celebrating our own sexuality. On our birthday, we're used to being the center of attention. We don't even think about God on our birthday. On Easter Day, I used to love Easter because it was like a relief of how much we actually talked about Jesus Christ, but we're still struggling. Why? Because we have to fight with that Easter bunny. We still are doing traditions that don't have anything to do with Christ, you know. And if we remain blissfully ignorant, yeah, maybe we can worship Christ on Easter. But as soon as it becomes clear that Estar was delivered up on the shores in an Easter egg, and that all of this stuff is about fertility and rabbits and blah 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 blah. As soon as all that comes up, you're not ignorant anymore, and it distracts you. So in that case, on Easter, period, I accept that ignorance is bliss. But once ignorance is gone, I can't do it no more, right? But then we have Christmas. It is blaringly obvious that we are struggling to think about Christ on Christmas morning. There is not one child who is thinking about Jesus on Christmas morning. There is only one thing on their minds: them gifts under that tree. And during the months leading up to that, most of your attention and your anxiety is on deciding which gifts you're going to give. And when they're opening the gifts, all of your thoughts are on, oh, are they going to like the gift? None of this is about Jesus. We try to make it about Jesus. We go to church for a little bit and we sing, oh, come Emmanuel, and we sing Christmas hymns. But then once we leave that church house, it's all about us again. So I'm just going to leave that there. Maybe I'll do another video on that, or maybe I don't need to, because I think I said it all. But these are issues. Answer these questions. Explain these things to us. Or if you cannot explain it, please make some changes. So the question is, are we Israelites? Am I an Israelite? I'm a black man. I'm pretty sure my ancestors were slaves. Um, you know, uh, are you an Israelite if you're black? If you're a descendant of slaves? Here's my current conclusion. According to the evidence that's been presented, it is highly likely that Israelite blood runs among the American descendants of slaves today. It is highly likely that that is a reality. I'm even willing to accept the idea that Israelite blood runs in a higher concentration amongst slaves or descendants of slaves around the world. I'm even willing to accept that. because of Deuteronomy 28, because it means that black people, the descendants of slaves, are fulfilling and substantiating prophecy in the Bible, right? But it is highly unlikely that all descendants of slaves are bloodline. We need to stop it. We need to accept that. We need to accept that. So what that means is I might be an Israelite. You might be an Israelite. Any one of us might be bloodline. And then we need to develop some conclusions off of that fact, which I think is a fact, right? But the statement I am Israel, we need to back off on that because it's not substantiated. It is highly likely that the synagogue of Satan is among the Ish people. Okay, yes, because there's a lot of kind of demonic stuff that has been done over the history of the world by Ish people. And the level of world influence and dominance and wealth that is contained amongst Ish people looks like Satan to me. Okay? But that does not mean that every Ish person is satanic. It does not mean that we need to hate a person simply because they identify as an Ish person. They may not even know the diabolical plans that they've been made a part of. All right. So, and then the last thing is that it's highly likely, in my opinion, because God said he would scatter. Now, if the Bible only said that the nations were going to scatter the people because they wanted to scatter the people, then I would accept that, well, maybe they didn't do such a good job of scattering people. Maybe there aren't Israelites in all four corners of the world. But the Bible says that God said he was going to scatter the Israelites. So if God said he was going to do it, I believe he did it, and he did a thorough job of it, which means that there are Israelites everywhere. That means anybody could be an Israelite, according to the scriptures that you guys have presented to me, according to the evidence, the historical evidence that you've given to me. It doesn't make any sense to me that Judaism was taught to Khazars just by a couple of Jews. It seems to me like if Judaism was being taught and venerated in a land up north, while Judaism was being persecuted in the Middle East, that people would hear word of that, and the Jews would migrate up to that area, and they would intermingle. And the question becomes, how many generations does it take to turn a black man's descendants into white people? Is that impossible? Most of the sources that Dante Fortson provides, the author's conclusions are that the phenotypical appearance of the Jews is influenced by the area they are found in. Right? And the argument is it because of interbreeding, or is it because of the climate? That's what I was getting out of most of the sources that I read from Dante Fortson. And I think that's a viable conclusion. Right? But I could be wrong. I am in the pews, looking, watching, learning, gleaning from these people who are putting a lot of effort into opening up these new avenues of thinking. And I'm completely open to it. But I got to check you when you're overstepping, when you're making unsubstantiated claims, because that does not help us come to the truth. I've said it many times. I'm a surgeon. I've come to learn that the truth is not a pill, it's a knife. It's surgery. It can be painful. But on the other side of enduring that pain is freedom and peace and an alleviation of the pain of the past. And that's what I'm looking forward to. This puts everything into perspective about what we're doing here with this Israelite question. The Israelite identity is the holy grail of our physical existence as human beings. We need to understand that from a Judeo-Christian perspective, from a biblical worldview. The Israelite identity is the holy grail. To be able to say you are a bloodline descendant of Israel is a big thing. It's not negligible, right? And here's the reason why. It's not because it saves you. It's because it is the type and shadow of salvation itself. Likewise, Israelite identity was always intended to be available to all who were willing to assimilate to God's culture. That was clear in the Old Testament. There were some groups of people who God knew would be more likely to influence the people away from him, and he excluded those people, but he always made provisions for strangers. And even at that time, it was really about those who were oppressed, refugees who were looking for a place of refuge. They could come in and they could seek asylum, but then they could also see the way of life of the Israelites and say, this is how I want to live. And it was available to them to become an Israelite. And that's a type and shadow of what we're dealing with when we talk about Christianity as well. Because just as you could assimilate to God's culture and become an Israelite, when you become saved, you are assimilating to a culture that proclaims Jesus Christ as King of the universe. Oh, it is a culture. You can't tell me it's not. God has a culture, and he's trying to teach it to us. The process of becoming familiar with physical types and shadows is important for Christianity. There is no, you're not a superhero or a super Christian because you can skip over the types and shadows and go straight to the spiritual. You become less of a Christian, in my opinion, when you don't understand the types and shadows. The types and shadows are important, right? That it's a part of the process of salvation. So yes, it is important that we fully explore this concept of Black people being Israelite descendants, because the pathway to understanding or to coming to a conclusion on that concept, or in general of just who is an Israelite today, will in some way be a type and shadow that will teach us the path to salvation. It is an endeavor in the physical that mimics an endeavor in the spirit. Now, when we just skip over it and we say, okay, I just believe in Jesus Christ and I'm accepting his Holy Spirit, there are things that are happening to us that we don't understand. And we cannot recognize God because we have not seen the type and shadow. We don't understand the type and shadow. But if we go through the type and shadow first, and then we receive the spiritual, the understanding is on a whole other level. We need to respect that fact and stop trying to act like it's not important. Indeed, the church should stop wasting time fighting against the topic of Black people possibly being Israelites and actually help us, especially if you're Black yourself. I don't care if you already know your daddy, if you're already satisfied with your life and your identity, you know who you are. Our people don't have a history beyond slavery. That's ridiculous. And we have this book that is suggesting that maybe we're the people. The Bible literally is suggesting that we're the people by matching our history, the things we went through, with the scripture. So we need to investigate this. We can't expect the Jews to help us. We can't expect white people to help us. Right? But it hurts when our own people talk down to us for wanting to know our heritage instead of joining in with the search. And I get it. I understand that you're trying to protect the gospel. The gospel don't need no protection. I'm telling you. The gospel don't need you to protect it. Join in to the flesh aspect of what we're trying to do. Help with that proponent of it. I mean, most of the people that come against Dante Fortson are so-called quote unquote losing their debates because they're not even reading the sources that he's providing with an open mind. You're not even reading it. You're just coming to say, I don't care what you say. You're trying to present another gospel. What? He has told you that it makes absolutely no sense that Dante Fortson has to say 10 times in a video, I believe in salvation by grace through faith. He shouldn't have to say that 10 times in a video. That's about whether or not we are the Israelites. That makes no sense. Right? You should be reading these things. You should become interested in this subject. Are we the people? Right? Because if we endeavor through this issue of the physical, of the flesh, while we're sharing ideas about doctrine and so on and so forth, that's fine. But we're endeavoring together on this one issue of the flesh. What we'll find is that we'll be enlightened more about the spiritual aspects of biblical revelation. Still, the Messianic Israelite community needs to be cross-examined frequently, and they need to be challenged. Look, you don't. If you're my Israelite scholars, you do not want to be in a YouTube echo chamber. You do not want to be in a place where nobody will challenge you, where everybody is saying yes and amen. It's not helpful for you. It's not helpful for the people that are following you. be open to challenges, be open to various interpretations. And unfortunately, you're going to have some thick skin, because on the Israelite side, there is a lot of raw emotion that we have to fight against, right? Well, anyway, those are my conclusions. Those are my thoughts. I hope this is received. I don't have a lot of followers or anything like that. I'm not a YouTube content creator. But, if you like what I said, if you agree with what I said, sure, leave a like, or you can subscribe to my channel. I will probably sparingly put up videos here and there as the inspiration hits me. Let's stay in touch. You can email me, whatever you want to do. I'm open. But I'm serious about this truth. And I think we're going to find it. But we got to work together. God bless you all. And until we meet again, or I see you in the chat, peace.